passengers on the MAF-T03 were able to connect with their respective telecommunication network towers on the ground at different points during the flight because of the low altitude that the aircraft was flying. This enabled some passengers in the MAF-T03 to establish data communication with people on the ground at certain times during the flight. Using the data connection from the various telecommunication towers, mobile phones of some passengers were tracked in flight. This allowed the tracking of the movement and the route of MAF-T03 from Kia on its way to Mzuzu Airport. It is in evidence that radar at Kia was able to track the MAF-T03 until it left Lilongwe airspace. Just before leaving Lilongwe airspace and transitioning to the uncontrolled airspace, the Kia control tower instructed the pilot for MAF-T03 to transition and change their radio frequency to 118.1 megahertz. The aircraft was expected to pass the Lilongwe terminal boundary called NASA at 0932 hours. In the technical sense, NASA is the reporting point along the W601 or Whiskey 601 route between Lilongwe and Mzuzu. It is in evidence that MAF-T03 transferred to frequency 118.1 megahertz as instructed at 0930 hours. And at 932 hours, MAF-T03 went off Kia's radar because it was flying low. The evidence received from the head of air traffic control at Kia was that thereafter, according to the flight information officer at Mzuzu, the weather in Mzuzu was poor and was getting worse. According to the flight schedule, MAF-T03 was expected to make radio contact with Mzuzu Airport at 9:50 hours. However, this did not happen. Noting that MAF-T03 did not make radio contact, Mzuzu Airport Tower started contacting MAF-T03 without any success. At 10:00 hours, Mzuzu Airport Tower called Kia for verification of the 10:02 hours estimated time of arrival for MAF-T03, which Kia confirmed. At 10:05, Mzuzu Airport Tower checked again with Kia to get an assurance on the 10:02 hours estimated time of arrival, upon which Kia confirmed and indicated that there were no changes to the expected time of arrival of 10:02. To this effect, Mzuzu Tower continued calling MAF-T03 to establish radio contact. It was the testimony of Mr. Moyo from Mzuzu Airport Control Tower that at this point, weather in Mzuzu had less than 8 kilometers visibility. Further, it was cold, foggy, with rain drizzles and low-level clouds. Mr. Joshua Valera, the late Vice President's advisor, the Honorable Richard Chimwendo-Banda MP, and Ms. Chimwemwe Kachikuo, the late Vice President's personal secretary, all gave testimony that on their way from Lilongwe to Mkata Bay via Mzuzu, there was very bad weather and low visibility from Mzimba turn-off all the way to Mzuzu, necessitating the use of fog lights and considerable slow speeds. It was the evidence of Mr. Ben Manda, a watchman for Jeep's security, who was stationed at Pampara Hill, guarding the TNM control tower, that the weather on this day around the area was very bad. He recalled that it was cold, foggy, and was raining, and there was very strong winds. He further recalled that the wind was so strong that it blew off some iron sheets from the nearby Ntunga Forest watchtower, which was just next to the TNM telecommunications tower. He stated that visibility on this day was poor and one could not see at a distance. The evidence of Mr. Manda was corroborated by Mr. Whiton Lusale. Mr. Lusale told the Commission that he was a forestry watchman at Pampara Hill. He recalled that on the 10th of June 2024, it was very cold, very windy, very foggy, and was raining heavily. He confirmed that some iron sheets from the watchtower were blown off by the strong winds. It was the evidence from the meteorological station at Mzuzu Airport that at no point on 10th June 2024 did the weather show +10 visibility, or over 10 kilometers. On this day, visibility was poor, and the weather showed visibility of 8 kilometers or less than 8 kilometers. It was also very cold, and there was also rain drizzle, a lot of fog and low clouds. It was noted that unlike other days, the weather at Mzuzu Airport did not improve since the first weather report was received at 0600 hours in the morning. It was stated that if anything, the weather was getting worse, contrary to the usual expectation that the skies would normally clear out as the day progressed. It is the testimony of Mr. Moyo that at 10:12 hours, MFT-03 established radio contact with Mzuzu Airport Control Tower and stated that they were 20 nautical miles north of Mzuzu Airport, about 37 kilometers. The crew also confirmed that they had fuel for up to 4 flying hours from their departure at Kia in Lilongwe. This was corroborated by the emergency section at Mzuzu Airport, who have a monitoring room where they listen to conversations between the controller in the airport control tower and the pilot of an approaching aircraft. This information is written in an aircraft movement book where particular information that can assist during an accident is recorded. Unfortunately, there is no capacity to record conversation between airport tower and the aircraft at Mzuzu Airport, as well as between the Mzuzu Airport tower and the emergency section at Mzuzu Airport. Having established contact with the Mzuzu Airport control tower, Mr. Moyo advised the crew on the weather in Mzuzu. He advised that visibility was less than 5 kilometers at the airport and advised them the runway to use being runway number 17. It was in evidence from Mr. Moyo that the pilot on the radio responded that they would go to Ekwendeni and then they would go and come through Ekwendeni. It was observed by Mr. Moyo that the proposition to come through Ekwendeni was normal, where there is severe weather in Mzuzu. In such circumstances, pilots would usually go to Ekwendeni and approach Mzuzu Airport from there by following the M1 road and straight to the airport. It was noted that MFT-03 never established radio contact after that. According to Mr. Moyo, the crew never indicated that there was anything wrong with MFT-03 at the time, and there was nothing in the pilot's voice to indicate any concern. He observed that it was the routine discussion that they normally have in such situations. It was Mr. Moyo's testimony that after another 5 minutes, at 10:17 hours, he tried to contact MFT-03 via radio to check their attitude and position and to warn the crew of the deteriorating weather conditions. It was Mr. Moyo's evidence that since they had last spoken at 10:12 hours, the weather had gotten worse, and Mr. Moyo could not even see Runyangwa area in Mzuzu from the airport, which is used as a yardstick. To him, visibility was less than 5 kilometers at that point. MFT-03 did not respond to the radio contact. Events after the aircraft accident. We'll start with the searching for the MFT-03. The Mzuzu Airport Control Tower continued attempting to contact MFT-03 several times. The Commission was informed that the next attempt to locate MFT-03 was at 10:17 hours. After some 30 minutes from his last attempt to speak to MFT-03, Mr. Moyo called Kia to find out if MFT-03 had diverted and was returning to Kia. The response was in the negative. At that point, Mzuzu Airport Control Tower tried to check with Karonga, but we are told that the aircraft cannot landed there. Mzuzu Airport Control Tower then asked Karonga to try and contact MFT on the radio, but Karonga said there was no response. At the same time, Kia also tried to contact MFT-03 on the inbound frequency to check if the flight was returning to Kia, but there was no response. After the above efforts to establish radio contact with MFT T03 failed, Mzuzu Airport Control Tower started searching for the aircraft by contacting aerodromes surrounding Mzuzu to check if MFT03 had landed anywhere. It is also in testimony that Mzuzu Airport Control Tower also contacted Kia to advise them to try and contact its counterparts in the surrounding countries, Lusaka, Beira, and Dar es Salaam, to check with their aerodromes. The response was negative, but were advised to contact Kia if they had any information on the missing aircraft. At this point, Mzuzu Airport Control Tower alerted the Mzuzu Airport Police, who escalated the same to their superiors at the regional police. Word was sent around to all police stations in the surrounding areas at Karonga, Likoma, Kasungu, Rumpi, Chinteche, and Usisia. After all these attempts, Mzuzu Air Traffic Control Tower then called Kia to ask Kia to raise other aircrafts flying in the Malawian airspace if they could try to listen to both frequencies, both in Mzuzu and Lilongwe, and relay information to MFT03. It is in evidence that at the time there were flights from Blantyre to Lilongwe, 7QCMK at 10:50 hours, and another flight from Likoma to Lilongwe, 7QFTA, 11:16 hours. Both flights tried to raise MFT03 on both 118.1 megahertz and 128.0 megahertz, but got no response. Another overflight flying from Addis Ababa to Harare, ET873, was also contacted at 11:20 hours. It also tried to raise MFT03 on these two frequencies, but received no response. It is in evidence that aircraft switch between these frequencies when they are within their respective controlled airspaces of Lilongwe and Mzuzu. It was in evidence that by this time, Kia Control Tower had received many calls from the MDF, Kia Aviation Security, and Kia VIP Lounge inquiring about the aircraft MFT03. From the MDF, the message was clear that once any contact is established with the MFT03, the crew should be advised to return to Kia as the funeral ceremony in Kadabe had already started. On the other hand, the VIP Lounge wanted to know the return arrival time once contact was established so that they could contact and organize with the late Vice President's office. The Commission received evidence that the MFT03 used a very high frequency of VHF radio, which uses line of sight. By this, it means the contact will be established between the aircraft and another point as long as there is no obstruction to the line of contact. Evidence received also established that it was normal for crew flying to Mzuzu to sometimes fly to Ekwendeni if the weather is bad, and thereafter visually using the M1 road to navigate their way and land at Mzuzu Airport, since the airport is just next to the M1 road. It was also in evidence that Mzuzu weather is very unpredictable, such that it is common for pilots to circle around for a while before finding a space to land. It was in evidence that in aviation, the air control tower would normally issue weather reports to the approaching aircraft, but it is the decision on whether to land or not rests with the pilot in command. At 11:30 hours, after noting that there was still radio silence, Mr. Moyo reported to Kia airport manager and director of aerodromes and air navigation standards in the Civil Aviation Authority that MFT03 was missing. The Commission established that information that the aircraft was 20 nautical miles north of Mzuzu and that the crew were flying to Ekwendeni led to some confusion. The confusion was further exacerbated in retrospect when it was estimated later that the aircraft crashed at 10:16, which was 4 minutes after the contact with Mzuzu Airport. The location of the crash is nearly equidistant to the 20 nautical miles position stated by Mr. Moyo. The Commission received contrary evidence from the military at the Zomba Air Base. We were informed that the aircraft was 20 nautical miles northeast of Mzuzu, which was around Usisia in Katabe. The Commission heard evidence that when weather is bad in Mzuzu and its surrounding areas, pilots sometimes go to Usisia hoping to approach Mzuzu from the lakeside, or Ekwendeni hoping to use the M1 road in order to navigate and land at the Mzuzu airfield. From the evidence received, it was also thought that the aircraft had failed to land and was therefore contemplating returning to Lilongwe. The mention of Ekwendeni also had the effect of directing the initial search to Ekwendeni before it shifted to the Airtel tower at Leiplan. In light of the delayed arrival of the late Vice President at Mzuzu Airport, the Deputy Commissioner of Police for the Northern Region, Mr. Clinton Mitai, told the Commission that on instructions from the Commissioner of Police for the Northern Region, Mr. Richard Lohanga, he ordered the Vice President's Guard Commander, who had led the advance team and were at Mzuzu Airport, to remove all the motor vehicles that formed the late Vice President's convoy to avoid raising suspicion with a delay among the people. The convoy was moved to the regional police station. The conduct at the funeral service of the late Mr. Kasambara. According to the evidence before the Commission, the funeral ceremony in Karabe started around 10:00 hours. When the funeral service started, and those present were advised that the late Vice President had been delayed. Later on, it was announced that the late Vice President had failed to attend the funeral. Evidence received indicates that around 12:30 hours, the Commissioner of Police for the Northern Region and other senior police and MDF4 officers were seen leaving the funeral service in a hurried state. The Rescue Coordination Center. Mr. Fred Kisepea, Director of Aerodromes and Air Navigation Standards in the Civil Aviation Authority, informed the Commission that a Rescue Coordination Center is a point where a search and rescue function is instituted and coordinated whenever an aircraft goes missing. Each country has an obligation under the International Civil Aviation Organization's Convention on International Civil Aviation, also called the Chicago Convention, to institute a search and rescue mission when an aircraft goes missing. In Malawi, in the Malawian aviation industry, the Rescue Coordination Center is established at Kia. Annex 12 to the Chicago Convention refers to 3 emergency phases which guide search and rescue. A, uncertainty phase, a situation where uncertainty exists as to the safety of an aircraft and its occupants. B, alert phase, a situation where apprehension exists as to the safety of an aircraft and its occupants. C, distress phase, a situation where there is reasonable uncertainty that an aircraft and its occupants are threatened by grave and imminent danger and require immediate assistance. Accordingly, the Rescue Coordination Center was activated at 11:31 hours after the senior aerodrome's flight officer in Mzuzu reported to the airport manager at Kia and the director of aerodromes and air navigation at the Civil Aviation Authority that he had a missing aircraft. The Rescue Coordination Center was initially established in the air traffic control room to coordinate the search of the missing aircraft. At 12:00 hours, the Rescue Coordination Center was moved to the conference room at the Airports Development Limited, ADL, for 2 reasons. First was to accommodate more stakeholders that were coming to join in the operation, and secondly, to allow the air traffic control room to revert to its functions and deal with air traffic within the airport vicinity. At that point, the following gathered in the Rescue Coordination Center: the Chief Executive of Airports Development Limited, the Acting Director General of the Civil Aviation Authority, the officer in charge of police at Kia, and other officials from the Malawi Civil Aviation Authority, Department of Civil Aviation, Malawi Defense Force, Malawi Air Force, Airports Development Limited, Airport Police, National Intelligence Service, Airport Fire Services. The Rescue Coordination Center facilitated further contacts to the following airstrips to check if the aircraft had landed in those airstrips: Likoma, Vwaza, Kabwafu, Karonga, Nyika, Chitipa, Dwangwa, Chimteche, Mfuwe in Zambia, and Mbeya and Songwe in Tanzania. At 12:42, Civil Aviation authorities based at Mzuzu Airport deployed teams to search around Ekwendeni area, where the crew had reported that they were proceeding at initial contact with Mzuzu Air Traffic Control Tower. The commanding officer from Moyale Barracks also mobilized a team of servicemen to go and search around Ekwendeni. Meanwhile, the Rescue Coordination Center also contacted the Aeronautical Rescue Coordination Center based in Johannesburg, Republic of South Africa, for assistance. Activation of search and rescue. After 17 hours, which was exactly 4 hours from the time the MAFT-03 had departed from Kia, with fuel endurance of 4 hours, the search and rescue operation was activated. At this point, it was absolutely clear that MAFT-03 was no longer in the air. The search and rescue was coordinated between the MDF, the police, and civil aviation, and was established at an old airstrip near Laiplai at Chikangawa in Mzimba. The activation of the search and rescue entailed mobilizing police officers, mobilizing military personnel, mobilizing Red Cross Society personnel, mobilizing civil aviation personnel, and alerting Mzuzu Central Hospital and Mzimba District Hospital, which are closest to Laiplai but less equipped. The two hospitals were also to set up trauma centers within their hospitals, mobilizing ambulances from the two hospitals as well as other health institutions, and establishing a command center at Laiplai. The first group to be mobilized was from the MDF, Moyale Barracks. Two sections of troops and an ambulance proceeded to go and start searching in Ekwendeni based on communication from Mzuzu Air Traffic Control, because they were thinking that it was the last position the aircraft went. As the troops were being dispatched, another communication came that the Ekwendeni mission should be cancelled, and instead the search team should proceed to Laiplai, because the information by telecom providers and Malawi Communications Regulatory Authority was that a mobile phone signal of one of the passengers was picked by one of the towers at Laiplai. The team proceeded to Chikangawa, where the search concentrated around the Airtel Tower at Laiplai, based on the indicative radius of 10 kilometers around the tower at Laiplai. Mobile phone data showed that some phones belonging to the passengers connected with the Laiplai Airtel Tower, with one phone still active at 11:06 hours. Data from Airtel also had one of the phones briefly connecting with the Airtel Tower in Chikangawa at 10:12 hours. The Chikangawa Tower is closer to Mzuzu than the Laiplai Airtel Tower. After the search of the 10 kilometers radius achieved with no success, the search was extended to a 20-kilometer radius. Evidence received from all the institutions and agencies who were engaged in the search was that the weather was very bad on that day. It was foggy, cold with rain drizzles, and visibility was very poor. It was received in evidence that while the search and rescue had started a bit earlier, it was around 1700 hours that most of the stakeholders converged at Reply, and they kept coming. Organization of the search and rescue. Evidence received shows that initially there was poor coordination of the search and rescue. From the trigger point of 13-17 hours, different stakeholders and institutions organized their own search and rescue missions. The MDF mobilized this platoon based at Kasitu camp in the Reply part of Chikangawa forest as the initial team, which was later joined by personnel from Moyale barracks. The platoon at Reply has a permanent base as part of the protection of the Chikangawa forest or the Reply plantation. The police mobilized this personnel from Kadabe, Mzuzu, Nderwa Division, and Mzimba. The Red Cross mobilized volunteers from Mzuzu and Mzimba, but were joined with officers from the headquarters in Lilongwe. The team from Lilongwe organized blankets and a drone. Reply provided its staff, especially those who normally work in the forest, as well as vehicles. UTM had some of its members participating in the search. Members of the public and the media joined the search as and when they could. Notification of His Excellency the President. At 11:35, the MDF commander contacted and informed the President of the missing MFT-03, as well as the fact that they were searching for the aircraft. At 12:15 hours, the commander of the MDF went to Kamuzu Palace to brief His Excellency the President in person. The MDF commander was ordered by His Excellency the President to continue the efforts to locate the MFT-03 and report back within 4 hours. The Commission received evidence that later in the day, the MDF commander, accompanied by the Air Force commander, went again to Kamuzu Palace at 1500 hours. They were joined by the Secretary to the President Cabinet, Minister of Health, and the Inspector General of Police. The aim of this visit was to apprise His Excellency the President on the situation on hand and the progress made so far. The President was informed that the plane was still missing and could not be located. The President directed that the Inspector General of Police and the Minister of Health should go and brief Madame Mere Chirima about the missing aircraft. His Excellency the President advised that a press release be prepared informing the nation of the development. His Excellency the President further directed that his trip to Bahamas be cancelled and that external support be sought for search and rescue. After that, His Excellency the President called for a cabinet meeting at 1800 hours. This was later shifted to 2200 hours to allow several cabinet ministers who were traveling from outside Lilongwe to attend. The agenda of the cabinet meeting was the missing of the MFT-03. After the cabinet meeting, His Excellency the President addressed the nation at 2300 hours, where he informed the nation of the missing MFT-03 and provided an update of what was known to Cabinet at that point and the progress the search was making. Communication from passengers. The Secretary to the Vice President, Dr. Sikwese, gave evidence that he communicated via WhatsApp text with the late Vice President while the MFT-03 was in flight between 09:30 and 10:07 hours. He stated that his last message sent at 11:10 hours was, however, never delivered. The last message was requesting the late Vice President to consider returning to Lilongwe as there were indications that there was severe weather in Mzuzu. The Special Assistant to the Vice President Media, Ms. Winnie Nyondo, gave evidence that she received a text message via telegram at 10:10 hours from the Old Dukam to the Vice President, Inspector Chisomo Chimanin. The message read, and I quote, "Too much turbulence." She later posted this message on her Facebook account. She indicated that this was not the first time that the ADC and other members traveling with the late Vice President in that aircraft had communicated while in flight. Evidence indicates that there were several phones which were active during the flight to Mzuzu. These phones belonged to the late Assistant Commissioner of Police, Kapeni, the late Inspector Chisomo Chimaneni, the late Major Wells Aidin, and evidence obtained from Telecom Networks Malawi shows that one of the phones belonging to Daniel Kanyemba had gone off at 10:16 hours on 10th June 2024. The last tower that it was used was the TNM Tower at Pampala Hill in Tungwa, the site of the accident. This information was given long after the aircraft was already discovered. The medical preparations. Evidence was received that around 1500 hours, the Mzimba District Hospital and Mzuzu Central Hospital were alerted of a possible aircraft accident in Chikangawa. The two hospitals were asked to prepare emergency ambulances and emergency centers. Mzuzu Central Hospital mobilized an emergency team comprising a trauma surgeon, an anesthetist, nurses, including a trauma nurse and critical care nurse, and 3 ambulances. Unlike Mzuzu Central Hospital, Mzimba District Hospital does not have an emergency center. So the hospital had to designate space to accommodate any casualties, if any. The hospital therefore prepared a high dependency unit in case of injuries. This included mobilizing resources from different wards, such as oxygen cylinders, drugs, and etc. Further, Mzimba District Hospital dispatched 2 ambulances to Chikangawa to join the search team. The ambulance team included anesthetists, clinicians, and nurses. The Director of Health Services for Mberwa District Council led the medical emergency preparatory team. Mzimba North District Health Office also sent 2 extra ambulances from Mzuzu. The Mzimba North DHO is based in Mzuzu, while the Mzimba South DHO is based at the Boma. Among the team dispatched from Mzuzu Central Hospital was a surgeon. Since the place and site where the aircraft may have come down was not ascertained, there was no prior decision of whether to ferry any casualties to Mzimba District Hospital or to Mzuzu Central Hospital. The determining factor was the distance. Response from Laiply. Evidence was received that around 1500 hours, the SPC called the Chief Executive Officer of Laiply to inform him of a possible incident involving the Donia aircraft and also to ask for assistance in the search of the MFT-03. Although the Chief Executive Officer was not on site at the factory, Laiply immediately mobilized his staff, especially those who were working in the forest and were very familiar with the area, to help in the search. Laiply also provided vehicles to the search parties. The team from Laiply worked hand in hand with the MDF and the police and the other parties who were searching. The central point of coordination was the old airstrip at Laiply. Initially, the parties were searching blindly around a 10-kilometer radius of the Airtel Tower at Laiply. This was later expanded to 20 kilometers, but concentrating on the east of the tower, the Kalunguru charge within Laiply concession area. Laiply manages a plantation that is 20,000 hectares planted area. It has regular patrols, and a lot of people work daily on a daily basis around the plantation. The plantation has 4 sections, namely Kalunguru, Chikangawa, Champoyo, and part of Mtungwa. Each section has 7 compartments, and each compartment has a number and an area. At the time MFT03 went missing, Laiply had just employed about 150 laborers to do weeding in the forest management area. The MDF has a platoon stationed within the Laiply plantation. The platoon was brought in following cases of thefts of trees and timber as well as encroachment. This was a result of an agreement among the ministries responsible for forestry matters, the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Homeland Security. Let me at this juncture invite Commissioner Alan Chinilo, our Senior Counsel, to continue rendering the report.